This is Steve Hackett. You're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Well, firstly, I've got to congratulate you on yet another wonderful album. The last 20 years or so have been extremely prolific for you, haven't they?
Yeah, I'm particularly fond of the new album. Something special happened, and I'm still trying to put my finger on it. But it does feel as though I'm still trying to understand it. If you know what I mean. I know, normally I'm supposed to have created it, but I'm not sure it works that way. I think that somehow something takes off of its own accord. You set things in motion, and then you're looking for that indefinable thing that we call magic. And I think I've had it happen 3 times in my life so far. 3 different albums, and this is one of them. Once with Genesis, once very early on in my early days of my solo stuff, and then this one. Just something special about it.
It's been a wonderful burst of creative energy from you over the last 10, 15 years. No shortage of album releases at all. Can you put that down to anything at all?
Probably remarrying and getting older. I think the twin carbo engine of that. And it's great to be married to Joe, who's a committed world traveler and writer and all sorts of things. And we do a lot of stuff together. And she loves to be on the move. So she's got a gypsy soul in a way, which is great. She loves to wander, and so do I. It's partly that, and I think the passing of time. I am aware that there might not be forever to come up with music, and I think I've redoubled my efforts because of that. So I've always got a notebook with me.
With this record, in the recording process, was there? Did you have a particular game plan going into the sound that you wanted to achieve?
No, I think it's lots of little things, really. There's no overall plan. Much the same as the previous album. I was working with people from all over the world just because they happened to be friends and played exotic, wonderful instruments such as Shima Mukherjee playing the sitar and Malik Mansurov on the tar. You could say that was a game plan to cast a wide net over the whole of music, and then still come out with a rock album, but with lots of other influences. That's a kind of plan to broaden the shoulders of rock, and I've been nudging at that for decades.
There's a real range of moods throughout the album. There's a dramatic feel at times. There's a sense of calm in other times. But was that something that you were looking out to achieve? Take that listener through a roller coaster of different moods?
I think so. Yeah, I do like contrasts, and I think that people can get very bored very quickly with one genre, and I suspect they want surprises. I know I do. The ideal music is full of surprises, but it all depends. I mean, you get home and you put on a record, you put on a jazz record, you've got an idea what's going to happen. You put on something classical, and you might hear wonderful harmonies, but just in terms of genre hopping, is it going to be surprising? And you probably have to answer no. It depends what you call surprising, of course, yes. If people are just interested in pure harmonic progressions and the power of playing and all of that, then I can understand those other 2 genres might address all of that, but it won't address the idea of if you were making a film and you were thinking, well, I wanted to do something that's different from all of that, not necessarily action-packed adventure, but something else. So I'm always questing. I'm always looking around the corner for something that will surprise and satisfy. It's a neurotic search for that. I'm beset by it daily, if not hourly.
Is there any particular theme you could place upon the album?
Well, I would say there's a peace theme that underlies the whole thing. It's what we end the album with the track called Peace, as a kind of resolution to all the other conflicted ideas. Obviously, at the moment, the world is becoming a highly unstable, if not dangerous place, and much of the album addresses that. But without wanting to ram it down people's throats, I think there are some songs in there, so you can listen on the level of, oh, that's a nice tune, or I don't like that much, and then you move on and you hear something else.
Yeah. Tell us about Roger King and what he brings to the table for you in the production process.
Yeah, it's funny working with Roger. He's I suspect that it's a little bit like the way Elton John works with Bernie Taupin. I'd heard that Bernie Taupin was rarely ever impressed with anything that Elton did, and that was, fundamental to the dynamic of their relationship, which I assume means that Elton gets pushed further by that than he would do of his own accord. And I suspect it's the same with myself and Roger, where whatever I come up with, he will remain impassive and try and work on the detail of it, if I'm lucky, and bring the ideas to full fruition. So I think what I was aiming for with this was to have a fully orchestrated rock album, perhaps for the first time, where orchestral textures were as important as the rock ones or the ethnic instruments, and he's very good at that, at blending all that stuff. But if you're looking for enthusiasm, he's the wrong guy to be working with. He's very much it's that kind of impassive, immovable thing that I respect a lot. So he'll look at me quizzically, which means must try harder, Hackett. It's almost headmasterly. He lords it over me with his knowledge of musical theory, and I'm all instinct to his rules. But that's how it works. It's that tussle, I think, between the two. And I do write with Joe a lot, and then take it to Roger. But he surprises me at times with the things that he kicks in that are of such great relevance to ideas that are mere doodles of mine, and they get fleshed out and they turn into character portraits. If I'm lucky, it takes on something of its own, and he's got such a wonderful array of sounds in his audio wardrobe. Lots of stuff. We do use humans, of course. It's not just the two of us. We want to work with humans. That's important.
You mentioned you and your wife Jo do a lot of things together, and one of those things is songwriting. So tell us how the songwriting procedure works between the two of you.
Well, she's a very busy person, so I practically have to book up to say to her, look, I've got a song here, and I know you like to write with me. I need to find a moment in that busy schedule where she's got half an hour to go, yeah, that works, that doesn't work, that might work. And it's a bit like a game of football. We kick the ideas around. At this point, we know each other well enough that no one's threatened if the other says, I think there could be a stronger idea here, or there could be a variation. And she says to me that musicians love to groove and repeat things, and what you really need is a variation, and then she'll invariably sing it to me, and I'm aware of that. She likes, coming from the musical family, she likes surprises. She wants the information to be constant. She doesn't want to be read the same page over and over again. And then there's the lyrical side of things, where she's very keen on the idea of story, and it's whatever it takes to bring out the good line or two. So it's a bit of a yo-yo, really. It goes up and down, it goes sideways, and nothing's sacred. until we've thrashed this thing into shape, and or if it's like a ball, using the game analogy, it's got to be a well-kicked football backwards and forwards until the game is complete.
If there was any one song on this album that for you best typifies what the record is about, which one would you select?
Well, it's probably Beasts in Our Time, but then I end up thinking about the opening track quite a lot, Fallen Walls and Pedestals. So I'm afraid I've given you two there.
Yeah.
But there's something special about Beasts. I like the way it's really the way the strings work. The orchestration is what thrills me about that.
Watching the DVD of the making of the album, I got the impression that you're one that is very open to taking on board the ideas of the other musicians that you're working with to contribute. You don't take the my way or the highway approach at all.
No. I think that if you work with great people, they'll do great things for you, and you need to give them space to do that. So I don't take all the solos myself by any means. I think the strength is in whatever the ensemble comes up with. So I go to great pains to try and make people feel comfortable. I don't think you can necessarily terrorize a great performance out of a musician. You might be able to do it with an actor, perhaps, if you want someone to look upset, but that won't really work in music. So to get the best out of somebody, I tend to use a lot of encouragement, praise. I've noticed that works with both older musicians and very, very young ones. If you tell someone that they're doing very well, it usually means, for a young musician, 6 months later they'll come back and they'll have turned into an absolute virtuoso. People need permission, I think, rather than criticism. Criticism only goes so far. If you sense that someone is the real thing and they're really passionate about it, they'll be self-critical. You don't need to knock people down. Not in my world, anyway.
Did the in general terms, did the arrangements change much during the recording process to how you originally perceived them?
Well, I think that I've got a theory, which is that all art is part of a rescue package. So you start off with the initial disaster, or at least a doodle, and then you rescue it by means of attention to detail. I'm sounding like Batman here. But the devil's in the detail. I've listened to early versions of tunes that I've loved finished versions of, and then you hear the early versions and you think, what were they thinking of here? There's nothing here. Stamp on that flower, and how wrong I would have been to have done so.
There are some wonderful contributions to the album, and one of the standouts is the vocal contribution of the McBroom sisters on Underground Railroad.
Yes.
Tell us how they came together.
Yeah. Well, I bumped into Lorelei, I think, first of all, once or twice with friends, and then I was on one of the boat cruises, one of the cruise to the edges, probably several cruises ago now, and she introduced me to her sister and told me a little bit about what they do, and then I was jamming with Dave Kurtzner live at midnight on the pool deck, and I heard them singing, and I thought they sounded wonderful. And then over time, we thought we might do something, and I had the idea of the Underground Railroad tune, that it might be right for them, and they picked up on it immediately. And I was saying to Lorelei after we worked together, I said, you've got that kind of Mary Clayton, "Gimme Shelter" type voice when you open up the pipes. And she said, yeah, and she was showing me a film where she worked with the Stones herself, and she was singing that very thing, and you could hear that voice, and there's just something about it, isn't there? That unbridled, the power the ability to be able to shake walls and something so soulful and bluesy and rootsy. It is that voice that you've always wanted to work with, and there's also Durga, who has a deeper voice and more, in some ways, a more jazzy kind of tone to it, and the gospel thing that we did together, of course. But she had a more Selena Jones kind of sound, this deep, rich. I guess in female terms, it's perhaps contralto, but I think of it almost like a female baritone. Where it's androgynous. It's oh, someone's picking up the phone. Don't know what that's all about. So I had a great time working with them when we talked about doing future things. They've been a great pleasure to work with and a source of inspiration.
Oh yeah, look, to put it in movie terms, it was just perfect casting. They were just made for that role on that song.
Yeah, I'm hoping it'll get made into a movie. That the book that I took it from, and the story of Harriet Tubman, which was the reality that I think that the book was based on. It deserves to be done by Hollywood, and of course they're going to call me up to orchestrate it thoroughly. But Hans Zimmer will probably get there first, and therefore, but that's okay. A song is a film, isn't it, for the ear, I think.
Yeah.
Potentially a world unto itself if it works, and many of these tunes seem to have a completeness about them. So I'm very happy to be sitting on that and then thinking about how do you follow that? How do you, never mind top it, how do you follow it?
A real centerpiece of the album is the 11-minute song, Those Golden Wings, which I believe was inspired by Joe.
Yeah, I think I'd written one or two love songs for her, but they were fairly standard in terms of length and content and what have you. But because she's a complex character, I wanted to write something that reflected that. So it ended up being quite a long tune, so it was about her, but then she started writing some of the last verse with me, so that ended up becoming about us. So it starts off becoming as a love song to her, but it ends up being about our combined experience, and it's pretty epic length. For songs these days, it's epic length. For Genesis songs, it was an average length. Your sort of 10 or 11 minute, 12 minute song was nothing surprising in that for a Genesis tune from the 1970s. So it's kind of full circle. It means there's time to orchestrate, there's time to sing, there's time to solo on it, and have lots of contrasts on the way. So it's a pretty ambitious tune, I have to say.
Some lovely orchestral touches on the album. Your love of orchestral sounds goes back a long way, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I fell in love with orchestras in the 1950s when I was hearing Tchaikovsky for the first time, and Ravel. Really, I think that those were the ones that I was really aware of. But in passing, of course, there would have been lots of great supporting orchestral work with the so-called pop music of the 1950s that just seemed to encompass everything from Gluck to everything that Mario Lanza was doing, Puccini, and you'd hear it all side by side on the same radio shows back, the light program back in the day, all music under one banner, and everything, therefore, a surprise.
You travel a lot, and it seems that your travels do inspire the music that you make. When you are traveling, and quite possibly meant to be in holiday mode, are you still taking on board inspiration for musical sounds?
Yes, I think it's a natural consequence of traveling that you'll come across music out in the open, in the wild, visiting places, watering holes, all the rest. Yes, you come across instruments, and I remember coming across a guy who ran a music shop in the souk in Morocco, in Marrakesh, and that was he was a great player. We recorded him on a mobile phone at the time, but we didn't think the quality was enough. His performance was great, but I didn't get to use that. And ever since then, I think I've always tried to pin it down. So I'll travel to Hungary to record a tar player if I think that works. Luckily, our sitar player, Shima, happens to live in London, although she's Indian. It's a long shopping list. It's a long wish list. Really, would be great to have some Chinese musicians on. I would really like to get some of the Erhu, the one-string violin, but I don't know any personally. But it might be the guy next door or his cousin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
But traveling around the world, you do get to hear some wonderful stuff, and I think film scores have unleashed a whole flow of interest in these things that would have been considered off the map at one time, but for the world of film, so much great stuff I think comes out of that.
The Indian musical influence is quite evident on Shadow and Flame. Tell us about that one.
Well, now Jo had an idea of a lyric which was talking about her experiences. She'd visited India before I had, and particularly Varanasi. So she was describing a scene over the Ganges where she was watching the light come up the bathers, but at the same time she said, but at the same time you've got all this beauty and candles and all of that. You see bodies floating down the river that are wrapped in shrouds, and she wanted to describe that in words. So we were putting that to song. At the same time, I had an idea of the hustle and bustle of India, so showing the two sides of it, the industrialized, mechanized side of it, and the hustle and bustle perhaps of Mumbai, Bombay. And I was reading quite a lot about this before I got to visit, and it sparked off a lot of things. And then we got Shima in when we just literally had a click track and not very much else, and got her to do her solo. And she said, I'd like to hear it when it's more fleshed out, when it's finished. And I thought, I want to keep up the idea of the same thing, the spontaneous feel. So instead of developing it too much into a song, I thought, well, let's keep it largely instrumental. And then right at the end, I played 3 different guitar takes and had them playing back pretty much at the same time, giving them different perspectives, reversing one, making one very, very remote and echoey, spooky, and another one playing fast stuff. And I thought, let's let it all happen, pretty much like the traffic that you're subject to when you're there, shutting your eyes, thinking, I'm going to die any minute. There are trucks hurtling towards us. How do they avoid each other? And the animals in the middle of the road. So it was an idea of let's try and conjure all of India. And when Shima heard it, when it was all done, she said, "You've actually followed raga form." And I said, "Oh, I don't know what raga form is." So she complimented me that I'd done that instinctively. So she was actually thrilled with it, which is lovely. Because she might have said, "What are you doing?" Yeah.
Hungry Years seems to be a song of reflection on past times. Is there a story behind that one?
Hungry Years is a place that, again, Jo used to visit. Although the words are mine, there was a place in Broughton, which was a kind of disco watering hole that she went to, and a number of her friends, and her sister, Amanda. So to some degree, I was reflecting their memories in that one, as I was with Shadow and Flame, which we just talked about. It's a love song. It's that sort of everybody lonely, everybody young, no one quite sober, as is so often the case.
Mm. But the tendency, I guess, for people is to categorise you in that prog rock genre, but I wouldn't call this album strictly a prog rock album by any means. It's much more. It's much more than that.
Thank you for saying that.
Has it got to the point in your career where people are going to label you with that label no matter what you put out?
I think on my headstone it will probably say that, you know, he was a 70s progressive musician, but
yeah.
Luckily it's done well in the charts in 10, 11, 12 different countries, and so it seems to be of relevance to an audience of all ages. It's done better than anything I've released for about 40 years.
Oh, wonderful.
So I think the difference between something that's progressive and something that's pop is just the numbers that something sells. So there are many things that I hear, I think, oh, you know, that could fit under a progressive banner, but I'm not particularly fond of the word prog in itself, I must admit. And I know a lot of musicians who feel that term lacks poetry. But on the other hand, if it's a genre that is pan-genre, then if it describes it, then that's fine. But it would be nice to have something a little more poetic, I think.
For sure. Aside from the music, the packaging of this CD is quite lovely too, and refreshing to see in this day and age where downloads are quite prominent, and I guess generally less care is taken these days in the production of hard copy CDs. But you've really gone for quality here. The booklet with the DVD bonus there as well. Is packaging still an important priority for you?
Yes, it is, because why should people own something if there hasn't been effort put into it? So we get as involved as we possibly can with all of that. Sometimes we do them ourselves in-house, but other times we've been particularly lucky to work with the Vici Domini couple, Angela and Maurizio and Angela. They're both photographers, and they'll go a long way to get a setup. So yeah, they're particularly clever at taking great photos and also photoshopping to take them a stage further. So that's been a creative team for quite some time. We don't always see eye to eye, but I think we push each other harder and higher, which I think is the mark of a great team. People have got to be able to take criticism. That's the whole thing about being on board with this team. Yeah, we don't threaten them. We just try and get the ante raised as much as we can.
Sure. So what are your plans in terms of touring this record?
I'm going to be out in about a month's time, kicking off in Europe. I'll be doing the whole of Selling England by the Pound, plus a track that Peter Gabriel started with the band that I finished years later with his corporation, included as a deleted scene, a part of the entire Selling England by the Pound, plus this other track, which I thought was glorious, and it was something that fell foul of band politics, lamentably, back in the day. But now I can include it as a deleted scene with the director's cut, or my version of it. So I'm looking forward to taking that in front of people again. Plus, I've advertised that I'll do most of Spectral Mornings, if not the entire thing.
Oh, wow.
And this album, I'll introduce as many tracks as we can fit in, and I'm knee-deep in rehearsals at the moment, trying to remember lots of this stuff. It's really, really demanding, but I'm very happy to be putting my shoulder to the wheel again to do test the memory, test the grey cells, and it feels great when. So I start my band rehearsals in about a week and a half, and I've just bought some new amps which sound incredible. So I'm looking forward to taking a slightly new team and new toys on the road.
Wonderful. I believe Selling England by the Pound is your favourite Genesis album, isn't it? I think I read that somewhere.
It's my favourite. Yes, it's my favourite. It was at a time when John Lennon was saying nice things about us, so that's a particularly happy memory for me. And I think there's something special that happened on the album. It steered its own course. At times it was rudderless, but perhaps for a good reason. It wasn't a typical Genesis album. I think that it was, slightly better than that. And there've been some great albums from the band, but this one, in a way, seemed to, even in the first track, it travels through so many changes. That's always been the challenge for me. Yeah, you introduce change, and you've got bridge passages and links and shifting sands. It was what it was all about for me. Dancing with the Moonlit Night, I think, is probably my favourite Genesis tune of all time. I love it for its wackiness, and there aren't too many tunes like it. There's only one version of that tune. You can't really write anything like it. I've tried to, since it just doesn't work. You can't. It's that combination of things. It starts off with plain song, then becomes Elgarian, and then goes into something that I think predates fusion and works like a time machine, backwards and forwards. So I'm still thrilled with how that works, and it's always a challenge to pull it off live, because you've got to be really got to be on your mettle to make it all work, to do the tap dance that accompanies it with the pedals and everything.
Yeah.
But I still love doing it.
Wonderful memories of your last visit down here. Are there any plans to bring this show down to Australia?
I think next year it's looking pretty good. It's not
good.
in the bag, but it's looking. It looks. Am I allowed to say it sounds likely, and then I shall get told off by all those who say, well, we're still negotiating this, but so I'm not allowed to say that, but I think that with a fair wind, we'll be down under.
Oh, brilliant. That's great news. Really look forward to that. You're always very welcome down here. Hey, Steve, thanks again.
I look forward to it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, been a pleasure catching up with you again.
Thank
and congratulations
you.
on a wonderful piece of work, and we're really loving it down here.
Thanks very much. I'm so pleased you like it. Thank you. Great to talk again.
And hopefully we'll see you down here soon.
Brilliant.
All the best. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.